Welcome to Healthy Cleveland. I'm your host, Leah Longbrig. Today's topic is on influenza. Back with us is Dr. Natalie Hinchcliffe, Medical Director with the Cleveland Department of Public Health, and Jordan Bryan, who is our American Sign Language interpreter with the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Organization. Welcome back, ladies.
Thank you.
So let's start off with what exactly is the flu and how does it differ from the common cold?
That's a very important question. I see so many patients in my office that are very certain they have the flu or very certain they have a cold. Both are viruses and both are very contagious. So certainly if you're at risk for the cold, you're at risk for a flu. But the flu is going to hit you hard and suddenly, and you're more likely to have whole body complaints, your whole body aching, having a headache, and a high fever definitely should make you think of the flu.
What are some additional symptoms to look for when it comes to the flu?
So top to bottom, headache, fever, like we said, a high fever in particular, a runny nose, cough, sore throat, feeling really tired and run down, and having body aches. And like I said, it comes really, really quickly.
Are there any additional symptoms that maybe go unnoticed? I mean, the sneezing and the coughing, and those are pretty common and open symptoms, but is there anything deeper that we should be aware of?
I think the big thing is that you can't miss the flu. A cold can kind of creep on, you're having a little bit of a runny nose, a little bit of a scratch in your throat. The flu, we're thinking that you wake up and you feel like you got hit by a truck. Your whole body hurts. You might, like I said, have a much higher fever and a headache. Those three parts, your body aching, your high fever, and your headache, are much more likely to mean you had the flu. And that if it came out of nowhere, I would show up into an urgent care or express care right away.
So how exactly does it spread? Because probably just think sneezing into your hands and then shaking hands with somebody, but what are all the things that we should be looking for?
Yeah, so you and I could spread the flu to each other right now because as we speak, we're releasing tiny droplets, little particles into the air. It's the same thing that when you see those photographs of someone sneezing and all these droplets have shot out, or when someone coughs, same thing. But like I said, just talking to each other, tiny droplets in the air are how we spread the flu to each other. So certainly things like shaking hands, sharing utensils, touching a doorknob that someone else touched. But it's important to emphasize that you don't have to make physical contact with someone who has the flu to get the flu from them.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why it's so important to cover your mouth, cover your sneeze when you cough, and also to wash your hands. And if you think that you're sick, to stay away from people.
Washing hands is very important.
Yes, there is nothing that we can prevent like spread of infection with hand washing.
Is it still the rule that sing the happy birthday song, and that's how long you should be washing your hands?
Yes, and that you want to turn the faucet off with the paper towel or whatever you're using, or with your elbow. Yes. Definitely trying to reduce the spread of anything that you got on your hands when you started washing, and making sure that you take a long time rubbing your hands together, hence the happy birthday song, to make sure that your hand washing is effective.
Is it the friction then that helps kill the germs?
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So who's most at risk?
So with the flu, with almost every single contagious illness, we see the very young and the very old at the greatest risk. Very young meaning less than 2 years old, very old meaning over 65. Pregnant people and women are also at risk, and it's important to recognize they're at risk up to 2 weeks after they've delivered. So just because you're home from the hospital doesn't mean you're out of the woods as far as the risk. Also, people with chronic conditions, especially asthma. There's a few people in my office when they say they don't want the flu shot that I give an extra consideration to and give more information to. And that's certainly the young, the old, pregnant, and people with asthma or other chronic conditions. Because some of the complications of the flu is that chronic conditions can be made worse. That includes an asthma flare or a worsening of heart failure, things that are really serious and can result in people being hospitalized.
What are additional complications to look for?
So the things that you want to look for as far as if you're looking at a person who you think has the flu, let's start with a child. Mm-hmm. So the way that we expect kids to be, right? They're happy, they're playful, they're making eye contact, they're eating, they're drinking, they're breathing normally. If you see a child that's in what we call respiratory distress, so they're breathing really quickly, or you can see the effort of their breathing in their body. We can see their ribs getting pulled underneath or their nose flaring. Those are late signs, and you need to call 911 immediately if you see those signs of respiratory distress. Also, kids should be drinking, they should be eating, and they should be peeing. We all don't like to eat when we're sick, so we're less worried about food. But fluid intake is really important. And the way that you know if your child's getting enough fluid is by looking at how much fluid comes out of them. How many wet diapers are they making? And if that reduces past 3 wet diapers in a 24-hour period, you should be worried and you should be on your way to care. Also, later signs like children who are crying but no tears are being produced, or if their mouth looks dry, those are late signs and very concerning. You should already be seeking medical care. In adults, we also worry about respiratory distress, shortness of breath, chest tightness, coughing that can't stop. We also worry about dehydration. And of course, in people who are later in life and may be less verbal, we're especially worried because they're not able, just like our children at some ages, to communicate with us about what's going on. So in kids, I always say, if they're not interacting with you like they should, they're very tired, you can't get them up, they're not looking at you like they normally would, they're not doing whatever behavior is normal for them, that's concerning. A child running around the exam room, I'm not worried about. If they're not producing enough fluid, they're not taking enough fluid, they look dry in any way, they're not making enough wet diapers, I'm worried about that child. Or, of course, if they have a very high fever and you can't get it to come down. And like we said, those signs of respiratory distress are late signs and you should be calling 911 if you haven't already. In adults, less direct, less big signs of respiratory distress because we're able to verbalize it. So the shortness of breath, the chest tightness, certainly people who are not taking anything to drink. And of course, if your fever is high and you can't get it to come down, no matter what age you are, we would be worried. Because some of the things that can happen from the flu are, like we said, worsening of chronic conditions, including heart failure and asthma, but also bacterial pneumonia. You can be sick with a virus from the flu and then get sick with a bacteria that causes
Your
pneumonia.
immune system's down.
Exactly, absolutely. And so that, of course, helps us recognize that people whose immune systems are not strong, people who are undergoing treatment with certain agents that reduce the strength of their immune system, people who are living with HIV or AIDS, and again, the very young and the very old don't have the strongest immune systems. These are the people that are at most risk for complications. And we see hundreds of thousands of people each year hospitalized from the flu. The CDC estimates between 140 and 960,000 people each year end up in the hospital because of this illness.
And isn't the number like 35,000 people died just last year alone from it?
Yes, it's horrifying, especially when we think about this is something we can prevent with vaccination.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to discuss that further when we come back from break, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back with more Healthy Cleveland.
Families come in all sizes and shapes. Sometimes your friends are your family by choice, or sometimes you're just stuck with Uncle Charles. But what we know is that you want to protect the people that are close to you. But the flu can unravel everything. Your flu vaccine protects you and your family. No matter what draws your family together, protect yourself, protect your family. Everyone needs a flu vaccine.
Welcome back to Healthy Cleveland. I'm your host, Leah Longbreak. Today's topic is on influenza. Back with us is Dr. Natalie Hinchcliffe, Medical Director with the Cleveland Department of Public Health, and Jordan Bryan, who is our American Sign Language interpreter with the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Organization. Welcome back.
Thanks.
So start by telling us, what should we do if we have the flu? Should we just wait it out at home, wait out the fever?
So if you are within the first 48 hours, the first 2 days of feeling that like you got hit by a Mack truck, body aches, high fever, headache, go to an urgent or express care. You don't need to go to the emergency room, but urgent and express cares are a great way to get care immediately and be started on medication right away. That 48-hour mark is a really important part because the medicine that we have for the flu only works if you get it in the first 48 hours. Now, backing up a little bit, of course, there are some people who do need to go to the emergency room immediately. And those are the people, like we talked about, who are exhibiting signs that they're not getting enough fluid, that they're not having enough air, that they're having shortness of breath, tightness, trouble breathing, or that they're not quite themselves. They're not doing the activities we would expect of them or interacting with us in a way that would be normal for them. Those people absolutely should go to the emergency room right away.
And it keeps you from making everyone else contagious.
Yes, thank you. So, of course, we want people who are infected to get treated, and we also want them to not spread it to other people. That goes back to our hand hygiene and even wearing things like a mask. If you think that you really have the flu, I mean, if you feel that awful and you're going to drag yourself out of bed, it's really important that you do your best to not spread it to other people. Let the staff at the clinic where you go to the urgent or express care know right away that you think you might have the flu, and they'll give you a mask. Cover your cough, cover your sneeze, wash your hands. Try and limit as much as possible that you touch things that other people are going to touch, like we said, like doorknobs.
So we hear influenza, flu, stomach flu. You get the flu shot, but it's only for certain strands.
Right.
Are all flus created equal?
So some strains of the flu are worse. And to back up a little bit, each year we have different flu strains. That's why each year we have a different flu vaccine, because we're preventing what we anticipate is spreading during that specific season. When people have the flu, they exhibit a range of symptoms, but like we talked about, high fever, headache, runny nose, sore throat, cough, body aches, and feeling really tired. But in children, they're also more likely to have nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So that's where we get this idea of the stomach flu. But it's just different people of different ages showing the same infection in different ways.
Oh, interesting. So how can we prevent it?
Vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. This is so, so, so important. I'm sure many people watching this have a job where it requires them to get a vaccine every single year. And of course, as a physician, I'm one of those people. So I've been vaccinated for probably 15 years in a row at this point. One of my colleagues earlier today was telling me that ever since she's worked for the city, she's been vaccinated, so for the last 20 years, and neither of us have had any issues. But of course, there are people who are worried about vaccinating. Predominantly what I hear from my patients is they're worried that it's going to make them sick with the flu.
I hear that a lot.
We hear that a lot. And the reason that we hear that is because for those people, the vaccine worked. So the vaccine cannot give you the flu. It is not the flu virus being injected into you, but it is part of the virus that your body sees as abnormal and attacks. When your body attacks abnormal things like bacteria or viruses or vaccines, it mounts an immune response, and that's what we want. That's how you get what are called antibodies, things that will prevent you from getting it in the future by attacking right away because they have some memory. But when the immune system happens, when that response to a vaccine happens, you can feel a little run down for 24 hours. You can have a little bit of a low-grade fever. You can feel a little under the weather. But you absolutely do not have the flu. The flu is much worse, much stronger, and has all of those risks and complications like hospitalization that we talked about.
It's just your body's way of adjusting.
Exactly. It means, like I said, that the vaccine worked. Your body mounted an immune response, and you are going to be protected from that specific strain.
What are some additional myths or misconceptions about the flu?
The
or common cold?
Yeah, so I think the thing that I hear the most often that's really frustrating to me is that either there is no treatment for the flu or that you can get the treatment at any point. And that's so hard because I don't think we've done a good enough job about getting the information out that you have to get into the office within the first 48 hours. We can treat the flu, but we can only treat it in that first 2-day window. And that's when people are probably feeling their worst. They've woken up that day feeling absolutely horrible with body aches and totally run down, in addition to all the other symptoms that make us think of the cold. And the last thing they want to do is jump in the car and go to an urgent or express care. But that's what they should do because that's when they can get treated. If you want, you can of course wait it out and see if the next morning you feel better. But if you don't and you think you likely have the flu, that's your last day to potentially get treated. So it's really important to get into the office. The other thing that's a misconception is that you can get treated much later in the flu, and that's also very frustrating because when you're later in the flu, the medicine just doesn't have the same effect. And so then we're really trying to just do our best to make you comfortable.
And you're also risking other things like pneumonia.
Absolutely.
Maybe scarlet fever or anything like that?
Not scarlet fever. It's mostly bacterial pneumonia that we worry about from this. Scarlet fever is caused from something different, from strep throat, which is actually a bacteria and is treated with an antibiotic. And that antibiotic you don't have to get just in the first 48 hours. You can get treated later on. So this is really unique to influenza, that there's this narrow window in the beginning of your illness when you can get treated.
Since Since people tend to confuse flu and cold quite a bit, is there any myth or misconception with common cold that you want to debunk?
I would say the biggest way I want people to remember to differentiate or distinguish between the two is the onset. How quickly did you feel sick? Did it come over a few days? You probably have the cold. Or did you all of a sudden feel incredibly run down, incredibly uncomfortable? That's much more likely the flu.
Is there anything else you think viewers should know about influenza?
I want you viewers to know that they can get vaccinated at both of our Cleveland Department of Public Health clinics. Starting on Monday, September 30th, we'll be offering vaccinations at the McCafferty Clinic, and starting on October 3rd, Thursday, we'll be offering vaccination at the J. Glenn Smith Clinic. And both of these are going to run every Monday or every Thursday, and no one will be turned away. If you have an insurance card, bring it, but no one will be turned away. We want to get people vaccinated. This is really an issue for all of us. By one person being vaccinated, we reduce the likelihood that another person gets it. So it is in everyone's best interest to be vaccinated.
And flu season tends to be what, September through May?
Very beginning of October through May, exactly. So that's why September 30th, October 3rd is when we're going to start providing them, because October 1st is exactly when flu season starts.
How can we get more information?
Of course, the Cleveland Department of Public Health website, either of our clinics, and of course, a great resource also is the Center for Disease Control, or the CDC, online.
Thank you so much, doctor, for being with us, and I'm going to make sure I go get my flu shot this time.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for tuning in to Healthy Cleveland. As always, we'll have this information for you at tv20cleveland.com. I'm Leah Longbreak. Until next time.